She was inside cargo locker 7 when I found her, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest and her silver eyes open in the dark. Not hiding, just waiting. The way something waits when it has given up expecting anyone to come. I had been on Station Vantis for 11 years, supply intake on level 4. I knew every locker, every crate stamp, every inventory discrepancy the Conclave's auditors never bothered to look at, because the service levels were beneath their attention. Number 7 was supposed to hold vacuum sealant, 48 units. It held 47 units and one small alien child, ashen-skinned, hollow-eyed, wearing a maintenance worker's tunic, 3 sizes too large, belted at the waist with a length of cable. I did not ask how she got there. The locker had been sealed from the outside. I brought her to my quarters, which was 2 rooms and a shared corridor on level 4's port side. I heated a tin of protein broth. It was all I had ready, and set it in front of her on the floor because the table was stacked with intake forms. She looked at the broth for a long time before she drank it. Her hands, wrapped around the tin, 4 fingers each, and were the color of ash after a fire goes cold. She did not speak. I did not push. I pulled a folded blanket off the shelf, set it beside her, and went to log the shift inventory. The first message from Conclave administration came at E300. Polite, bureaucratic, 6 lines. A minor had been reported missing from upper processing. If any level 4 resident had information regarding the whereabouts of a Vethani juvenile, they were asked to report to the administration desk before morning shift. I read it twice. Then I filed it under intake correspondence and went to sleep on the floor beside her, because she had taken the cot without being told and I wasn't going to move her. In the morning, she was still there. I made 2 tins of broth and a portion of flatbread I had been saving. She ate carefully, watching me the whole time. Not frightened, just measuring, the way a creature measures whether a thing is going to last. I understood the look. I had worn it myself for most of my life. I went to work. Marin from waste processing watched the girl. Marin didn't ask questions. She had been on Vantis longer than I had. The second message came at 1100, less polite. An officer of the retrieval division, a man named Sorrel, requested my presence at the administration desk at my earliest convenience. The language around earliest convenience made clear that convenience was not actually part of the offer. I sent back a reply. I was on shift. My shift ended at 1800. I would be happy to speak with Officer Sorrel at that time. Sorrel came to level 4 at 1400 instead, told me what I needed to know about how badly they wanted her back. He was tall, with a pale gold complexion of someone who had spent his career on the upper decks, where the light panels ran full spectrum. He stood in the doorway of the intake bay and explained, in a reasonable voice, that the Vethani juvenile was a ward of the Conclave's resettlement program, and that her transfer paperwork had unfortunately been misfiled. She was, legally, in their custody. He would appreciate my cooperation in returning her to upper processing, where she would be properly cared for. I said, I'd like to see the transfer paperwork. He said there had been an administrative irregularity. I said, I'd like to see it anyway. He left without the girl. He did not look at me when he left, which I had expected. Men like Sorrel look at you when they think you are going to be a problem for 10 minutes, and then give up. They stop looking when they realize the 10 minutes aren't coming. That night, 3 of my level 4 colleagues sat in the corridor outside my quarters and did not explain why they were sitting there. Marin brought a second blanket, Doss, who ran the water reclamation unit, a deck of cards. Nobody said anything about the girl. Nobody needed to. She had found the corner of the cot she liked, the far end, back against the wall where she could see the door. She watched the corridor through the gap I left the hatch open. Once, she looked at me and then at Doss and then back at me, and I nodded, because I did not have a word for what I was trying to tell her, and a nod would have to do. I named her Savette that night. It was my mother's name and I had not used it in years. I told her quietly, just the word, and she repeated it once, almost inaudible, like she was testing the weight of it in her mouth. The formal order arrived the next morning, printed on conclave letterhead, stamped with the Retrieval Division's seal. It cited Station Security Provision 14, which gave the conclave authority to recover any unregistered person on Vantis whose presence constituted a risk to station operations. I was directed to surrender the juvenile to a retrieval unit at Level 4's main access corridor at 0800. It went on currency 75. I read the order. I set it on the intake desk. I walked back to my quarters where Savette was eating the last of the flatbread, and I told her to stay behind Marin regardless of what she heard. Then I walked to the main access corridor, and I waited. Retrieval unit was for men, which told me the conclave had moved from assuming I would comply to assuming I might not. They had a scanner and a restraint brace, and a junior administrator with a tablet to document the handover. Sorel was not with them. Sorel had sent subordinates. The lead officer held up the order. I let him read it aloud. I waited until he finished. Then I said, "That child was sealed in a cargo locker from the outside. Before you tell me she's in your custody, going to tell me who sealed that locker and why." He said that was an internal conclave matter, I said. Then is an internal level 4 matter. Behind me, I heard the access doors on both sides of the corridor open. I did not turn around. I knew who was there. Marin, DOS. 11 years of co-workers who had watched the conclave treat the service levels like a different station entirely, who had eaten the short rations and filed the ignored maintenance requests, and nothing, because saying nothing was what you did when the people above you held every lever. The officer looked past me. He looked for a long moment. He said, "This is not over." I said, "No, it isn't. Go back upstairs and find me the name of whoever sealed that locker, and then come back down here with that name and a conclave attorney, and we will talk about what happens next." They left, all four of them. The junior administrator had stopped typing on the tablet somewhere around the second sentence. I went back to my quarters. Savate was standing in the corridor, not behind Marin the way I'd told her. Beside her, small hand wrapped around two of Marin's fingers, silver eyes watching the hatch. She looked at me. I must have looked different to her, because she made a sound I hadn't heard her make before. Not a word, not quite. Something between a breath and a question. I crouched down to her level and I said, "Not today." She didn't smile. She was not a child who smiled easily. But she leaned forward and pressed her forehead very gently against mine, and I held still and let her, and around us the corridor was quiet and the station turned slowly in the dark between stars. The conclave opened a formal inquiry 9 days later. They found the name of the man who had sealed the locker. They found 3 others connected to the same operation. Officer Sorel resigned before the inquiry concluded. I kept Savette. It took 14 months and a level 4 collective petition and one very stubborn conclave attorney who turned out to have a conscience. But at the end of it there were papers, an illegal designation, and a name on a station registry that had never held a Vithani name before. She was small and ashen-skinned, and her eyes were the color of old silver, and she was mine, and that was the end of it. The conclave learned, eventually, what most people in power are slow to understand, that the ones they don't watch are not the ones who have given up. They are simply the ones who have been waiting for the right door to open.